LitRPG, or literary role-playing game, is a genre of fiction built around the idea of taking video game mechanics and incorporating them into the world-building. Stat points, health bars, and activated abilities are reversed from their normal role. Instead of being an abstraction, a way to simplify a fantasy into something you can play in a video game, they have become the focus of the fantasy. Characters in these stories are able to earn XP and level up, either because they have been literally transported into a game, or because their world functions on game logic. Whether it's a fantasy magic system that happens to run on stat points, a pantheon of gods that hand out spells for spell slots D&D style, or even sci-fi nanobots with a user interface. Stories set in the LitRPG genre cover a wide variety of game types and can intersect with pretty much any other genre, from romance to superheroes. But unsurprisingly, one of the most common settings is a medieval-style fantasy with a magic system that runs on RPG mechanics. A lot of the world building for a regular LitRPG will be very familiar to fans and authors of fantasy. Typical worlds will be populated by dwarves and elves. In the wilderness, ancient ruins will hide legendary magical items, and in mountain lairs there will be dragons. The unique twist that sets LitRPG apart manifests in the system. While similar in purpose to magic or power systems in other stories, its presence in-universe is quite different. Characters often refer to the source of their abilities as the system in a very game-like way, though in the same way magic will be given different names like channeling, the system could be called something else. Its specific appearance will vary, but the classic is a stat screen straight from a game that appears to characters either visually or as a mental interface. However it looks, its function is the same. It represents the game mechanics. The system records and responds to characters' actions and rewards them. When someone defeats enemies, they earn XP, and once they earn enough XP, they level up and get stronger. This is where LitRPG storytelling takes a turn away from similar genres. While you still want characters with interesting personalities or strong arcs and compelling narratives, in LitRPG the focus of the actual plot can often become the system itself. The characters go out and use their abilities, maybe getting drawn into events along the way, and then get more abilities. There's technically no need for dedicated villains or an overarching quest. The story can just focus on exploring how the world works and showing off fight scenes. Antagonists are still useful, but they don't need the same personal connection or relevance they would in a lot of other stories. While this style isn't for everyone, it is fairly popular in the LitRPG genre, and despite their different structure, it can still appeal to readers used to more regular works. Taking this direction often overlaps with the genre of progression fantasy. Progression fantasy is pretty much what it says on the tin, fantasy whose focus is on a character progressing in skill and power over time. Past these basic premises, the actual details of how a system is put together get complicated very quickly. A full deep dive into all the ways a LitRPG system can be tweaked and tuned could easily take hours. Even when sticking to common, easily recognizable RPG mechanics, there's a huge variety of games and implementations to draw from. At the most basic level, most systems will assign people a class. Usually in-universe, this happens when people come of age and are old enough not to hurt themselves with their new abilities. But in settings with focuses on more species than humans, it's common for the system to be active from birth and to simply grow more complex as a person grows older. A class can cover anything a person can be or do. Something like a farmer, sorcerer, or soldier, or more complex and specific like a stoic guard, a light-footed thief, or a knight of the Seven Mountains. Since a novel is not limited by game design, classes have the opportunity to be far more in-depth and tailored to the individual and the story. Specific edge cases and synergies that could never be implemented in code are one of the biggest appeals of LitRPG stories. For the good of the plot, main characters will rarely receive a class that's simply okay for their situation. It will either be uniquely perfect for them with a focus on how powerful they are, or it'll be completely unsuitable and they'll have to figure out how to overcome their limitations. Besides stat points and leveling, the main benefit of a class is the skills it grants. Unlike a game where the skills are an abstraction that represents what your character can do, LitRPG skills are often extra powers. Fighters will still be able to learn to wield a sword, but with skills they can go beyond human limits. Skills will commonly let them do things that would be impossible otherwise, or turn a highly complex move into a simple matter of activating the skill. The details of how a class and skills progress after you get them will affect the character's journey and can have wide-reaching implications on world-building. In some systems, classes level up purely from combat. In worlds like these, monsters will be common, and every farmer will have to deal with weak monsters like goblins, slimes, and other pests and gain a few levels that way. Merchants will have to defend themselves when they travel to sell their wares, and those living in well-guarded cities will have to accept less personal power in return for their safety. These systems tend to award stat points each time a person levels up, making them faster, stronger, and more durable so they can handle more fighting. Alternatively, classes can earn XP each time a person puts effort into something related to their class. Now everyone can reach high levels, and assuming others can see their level, it will be a clear indicator of how hard they have worked, how powerful they are, and how good they can be expected to be at their job. A world like this might implement level requirements for certain jobs, and people might use their level as advertisement to get hired. After that, the complexity skyrockets when you start to consider whether classes can be swapped out, combined or evolved, and whether you can have multiple of them. When you then consider that skills can level up too, and all of these considerations apply to them as well, the options are limitless. Here an author has the opportunity to tune the system to support the story they want to tell. Looking at game design and how a mechanic incentivizes certain behavior can give you an indication of how a detail in your system might naturally push characters towards certain actions that serve the story. As a reader, one of the big draws of LitRPG is seeing exactly how the system is worked into the world building, and how the main characters navigate its limitations and take advantage of it. As with any genre of literature, LitRPG comes with a slew of conventions. Its relative flexibility means that you can easily write any genre of story in a LitRPG setting, but if your story is a LitRPG first and anything else second, there are a number of established tropes and subgenres that have emerged. Things like certain styles of game system that have become particularly popular, or a number of subversions of the basic LitRPG formula. On the game style side, some of the most recognizable ones are genres like the dungeon crawl or tower climb, where the hero delves into places filled with loot and monsters, a very classic D&D or roguelike experience, or the dungeon core, where the main character is either the sentient core or the master of a fantasy dungeon. They design the layout of their dungeon, fill it with monsters, and face off against heroes coming for the loot. Subversion-wise, we have the regression or reincarnation, where our main character either gets sent back in time to their younger self, or returns back to life in the far future. This one's more of a genre of its own that's pretty common in manga, but with the amount of them found in LitRPG and the unique twist the system puts on it, it's becoming its own thing. Rather than learning about the system and growing in power, the appeal here is seeing someone who knows exactly how everything works min-maxed to the best of their ability. It's basically a speedrun. Instead of sending the protagonist back, there's also the option to send the system back with the system reset, a subgenre that's gained popularity more recently, where the system suddenly breaks and deactivates, or resets, stripping everyone of the power they've accrued, and now they either need to rebuild or deal with a new reality. Despite being a relatively niche genre, LitRPG contains a huge diversity of stories. With video games covering pretty much every plot and experience imaginable, converting their mechanics into a power system lends itself to writing almost anything. The constraints of game mechanics can simplify things for authors by creating a precise, easy-to-define set of powers, while inspiring creativity to work within those constraints. Watching someone play a video game is a very different feeling to playing it yourself, and people enjoy each of them for different reasons. LitRPG strives to combine those feelings by giving readers the excitement of seeing someone struggle and excel at a game, and mixing it with the world players imagine when they wonder how good a game could be if the mechanics were just deep enough, if the gameplay were complex enough that you could almost imagine it taking place in real life.